Nobody ever taught you that your emotions have a due date. Not your parents, not your teachers, not anyone. But here's what's happening inside you right now, tonight, while you're sitting there. Your nervous system is quietly running a tab, and every single feeling you ever swallowed instead of actually feeling it, it's still on that tab, with interest. That grief you skipped over, that rage you smiled through. Every time your chest was tight and you said, "I'm fine anyway," none of it disappeared. It went somewhere. And wherever it went, it started accumulating. So here's the idea. I want to sit with you tonight. Every emotion you didn't fully process becomes a kind of debt. And what most people call their personality, their impatience, their restlessness, their need to stay constantly busy, isn't really who they are. It's a collection of unpaid bills. We're going to call this emotional debt. If you think you're just an impatient person, that's not a character trait. That's a bill you haven't paid yet. If you can't sit in silence without reaching for your phone, that's not a preference. That's avoidance of a creditor. If you're the most helpful person in every room, the one who anticipates everyone's needs before they even voice them, that's not generosity. That's debt servicing. But before this sounds like something you'd hear at a weekend retreat, let's get into the actual biology of what's happening. Because this is real and it's happening in your body right now. When something emotionally significant happens, something your system doesn't get to fully respond to, the charge of that emotion doesn't just fade. It gets stored, not as a memory. That's the part most people get wrong. It's stored as a state. A kind of aliveness in the body that never got to complete itself. This is why someone can be 45 years old, sitting in a boardroom, and someone raises their voice slightly, and suddenly, they're not 45 anymore. Their hands are shaking and they don't know why. That's not weakness. That's a nervous system replaying an incomplete loop. It never got to finish. Here's how it actually works. When a threat or an emotionally charged event happens, your autonomic nervous system mobilizes a response. You know the list: fight, flight, freeze, fawn. If the response completes, you fight and win, you run and escape, you cry and someone holds you, the charge dissipates. The system files it as resolved and returns to baseline. But if the response gets interrupted, if you can't fight because you're a child, if you can't run because the threat is in your own home, if you can't cry because crying was punished where you grew up, that mobilization never completes. All those resources that got spun up have nowhere to go. So they get locked into the body, tight shoulders, chronic jaw tension, stomach problems that no doctor has ever been able to explain, a low hum of anxiety that's been there so long you've started to think it's just how you are. We call it personality. It's actually storage. The body has been showing us this for decades. Peter Levine built an entire therapeutic approach around it. Bessel van der Kolk did the research that confirmed it. And here's the part that compounds the problem. Your brain's primary job is prediction. So when an emotional event goes unresolved, your brain starts scanning for similar conditions, not to heal, but to prevent. It builds an architecture of avoidance. Don't get close to people like that. Don't feel things like that. Don't be in rooms like that. And over time, those tiny avoidances become your entire life. What people call a comfort zone isn't a preference. It's a perimeter, your nervous system, built around everything it never got to finish processing. And what happens to debt over time? It compounds. 4 things happen neurologically when emotional debt accumulates. The first is that your amygdala, the brain's primary emotional alarm system, becomes hypersensitized. Each unprocessed event lowers the threshold for the next one. So it takes less and less to set you off. You used to be able to handle criticism. Now someone's tone is slightly off, and your whole day collapses. You think you're getting weaker. You're not. You're just accumulating interest. The second thing is that your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for reasoning, impulse control, perspective, patience, starts losing ground. Chronic emotional activation literally reduces how much it participates. Your amygdala starts running more of the show. You become more reactive, less reflective, more impulsive. You're paying compound interest on a debt you didn't even know you had. The third thing involves your stress response system, the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. When emotional debt accumulates, cortisol stays chronically elevated, not in a crisis way, in a background hum kind of way. An elevated cortisol suppresses your immune system, it disrupts the architecture of your sleep, It impairs your ability to consolidate memories. It increases visceral fat storage, which accelerates cellular aging. Your body is paying the bill. Emotional debt doesn't just make you feel bad, it makes you sick, probably at roughly the same rate as smoking. The fourth thing is the strangest one. The debt stops staying isolated. It starts recruiting. Unprocessed emotions pull other systems into the payment plan. Your relationships become arrangements organized around servicing the debt. Your career becomes a distraction strategy. Your habits, every single one of them, are interest payments. And from the outside, and even in the mirror, it just looks like that's who that person is. That's just their personality. What it actually is a nervous system drowning in compound interest and building an entire life around staying one payment ahead. So how do people manage all of this? How does the system cope when it can't process what it owes? The most common strategy on earth is numbing. Alcohol, weed, scrolling, food, shopping, binge watching. If you're honest with yourself, you're probably not doing those things because you deeply enjoy them. You're doing them because feeling nothing is cheaper than feeling everything you owe. And the terrible thing about numbing is that it works. That's why it's so hard to stop. It's not a willpower problem. It's a successful, short-term debt management strategy. The debt is patient. It waits for the vacation you can't enjoy, the retirement you can never sit still in, the weekend that fills you with dread instead of rest. That's the bill arriving. The next strategy is performing, becoming the funniest person in the room, the most helpful, the most agreeable, the most fine. When you see relentless performance, in yourself or in someone else, you're watching debt servicing. Behind it is usually a specific kind of loneliness, not the loneliness of being physically alone, the loneliness of being surrounded by people and known by none of them. That's the most expensive loneliness there is. And then there's self-medication, which is also about speed back to something that feels like normal. If you take the substance away without addressing the debt underneath it, you don't get someone recovering. You get someone drowning with nothing to hold on to. This is why the vast majority of addiction treatment fails. It confiscates the payment method without ever acknowledging what the payment was for. And then there's the relational version, the person who can't stop giving, who overfunctions, who anticipates every need, sacrifices constantly, bends themselves into shapes to be necessary to someone. They call it love. It's debt servicing. Because what they're actually doing is attracting what their nervous system recognizes, not what they consciously want. If love in childhood came packaged with anxiety, they'll feel most alive around people who make them anxious. If closeness came with control, they'll feel safest with people who dominate. If affection had conditions, they'll grow up believing the only love that's real is love they have to earn. They'll walk right past the person offering them peace. Now, trauma is a specific event, something that broke through the system's capacity to cope with it and close the loop. You can name it, clinicians can code it. Emotional debt is different. It's not an event, it's an accumulation. 1,000 small moments where something was felt and not finished. You needed to be angry and learned it wasn't safe. You were 6 years old and needed to grieve something and someone told you to be strong. You needed to be a child and your parents made you be the adult. None of those are clinical trauma. All of them created debt. And your parents, they probably did their best. They almost certainly did. But they were in debt too. They couldn't give you something they never received. They passed their balance forward without knowing it, and now it's in your account. Financial systems have a threshold, a point where the payments can no longer cover the interest and the whole structure collapses. Emotional systems have the same threshold. When you hit it, what follows is predictable. A breakdown, a health crisis, an identity collapse. Sometimes all three at once. Everything that actually resolves emotional debt, therapy, somatic work, trauma release exercises, breath work, psychedelics, meditation, certain intensive group experiences, they all share one active ingredient. Perspective, not look on the bright side, not other people have it worse. That's comparison wearing a self-help costume. I mean perspective as a mechanical shift in vantage point. When therapy works, it's not the advice that does it. Therapists will tell you this themselves. It's the moment you say something out loud and hear it from outside of yourself for the first time. You've been living inside a story for maybe 30 years, and suddenly you're looking at the story instead of from inside it. And here's the cruel part. Your debt actively prevents you from gaining the one thing that could resolve it. The avoidance, the numbing, the busyness, the caretaking, none of that is random. It's a defense mechanism against perspective, because perspective means feeling something, and feeling something might mean drowning. So here are the actual steps. Not advice, mechanical shifts. The first is moving from unconscious to conscious, seeing the payments you're already making. Most people in emotional debt don't know they're in debt. They think they're just tired, getting older. That's how life is. So the first move is learning to see the pattern. When you react way out of proportion to something small, that's debt. When you avoid specific feelings with specific predictable behaviors, that's debt. When rest feels dangerous, when silence feels threatening, when your body carries unexplained tension that no massage ever fully resolves. You don't even need to know the original event. You don't need to remember your childhood clearly. You only need to see the payments you're currently making. That's the first inch of distance. The second shift is naming your debt servicing behavior, not judging it, not trying to stop it, just naming it. What's your go-to? Numbing, overworking, performing, controlling, withdrawing, compulsive helping, name it. Write it down, put it somewhere you'll see it. Because naming something creates distance between you and it, and distance is where all choice lives. The moment your behavior stops being who you are and starts being something you can observe, the system stutters. Not stops, stutters. And that stutter is perspective beginning to do its work. The third is letting your body finish what it started. The emotions stored in your body aren't memories. They're incomplete motor responses. A fight you never got to have. A scream that stayed in your throat. A collapse you were never allowed to surrender to. These aren't things to be thought through. They have to move through the body physically, shaking, tremoring, crying without a story attached, rage discharged through movement. There are structured approaches to this. Somatic experiencing, neurogenic tremoring, breathwork, vagal toning, extended exhale protocols. Cold exposure is one of the most powerful and most underestimated. These aren't wellness trends. Our ancestors have been using tools like these for tens of thousands of years. The nervous system hasn't changed. What's changed is that we suppress the discharge instead of allowing it. You cannot do this from inside the activation. That's just re-traumatization. You do it from a shifted vantage point. Present enough to feel it, aware enough to watch it move through you, close enough to feel it, far enough to witness it. That's the window. You will not think your way out of this debt. It won't happen. You have to feel your way out from a vantage point where feeling doesn't mean drowning. The fourth step is stopping the accumulation of new debt, which has to be a daily practice. Every time you swallow something instead of feeling it, every "I'm fine" that your chest knows is a lie, you're taking out another loan. Just start with 10 seconds. When you feel something, stop and give it 10 seconds. That's it. You don't have to process it fully. You don't have to understand it. You definitely don't have to intellectualize it. Just let it land. In those 10 seconds, instead of being the person about to react, you become the person who notices. And when your nervous system learns that feelings are allowed to arrive fully without being immediately suppressed, it stops hoarding them. It stops storing what it now knows it's allowed to feel. The fifth step is getting a witness. This is the deepest shift of all, from isolation to being seen. Almost all emotional debt was created in isolation. Even if there were people physically around you, you were alone with something that was too large for you. And a big part of what your system is still holding isn't just the emotion itself, it's the aloneness. Being alone with something unbearable, especially as a child, is its own kind of wound. So the discharge process very often needs another person present. Not to fix anything, not to offer advice or reframe your pain into a lesson. A witness, someone who can sit with you while something moves through your body without trying to make it stop, without flinching, without rescuing, just present. What that person's presence gives you is a perspective you probably cannot generate alone. When someone holds space without collapsing or fixing, they become a kind of mirror. And in that mirror, you can finally see what's been moving through you without being consumed by it. It's what most of us needed at 5 years old and didn't get. Receiving it now at 30 or 40 or 60 won't undo what happened, but it completes something that has been waiting, possibly for most of your life. You didn't choose your debt. Nobody opens a line of emotional credit on purpose. It was opened for you by circumstances you couldn't control at an age when you couldn't understand what was happening. And you've been making payments ever since. Every tight smile, every "I'm good," every sleepless night, every relationship that collapsed under the weight of something you still can't fully name. That's a system doing its best with what it was given. I didn't want tonight to be about fixing anything. I just wanted to shift the vantage point, because the debt isn't the enemy. Your fixed position inside the debt is the enemy. Move the vantage point even slightly, and the debt starts to move with it. The question stops being, "What's wrong with me?" and becomes, "What do I owe?" And then, "How do I start paying it back?" That shift is the beginning of everything.